Mercedes had hoped for a stronger start to the Formula One season than the previous year, but the opening weekend in Bahrain disappointed the German team. Mercedes are in a state of crisis now, and there seems to be no way out. Toto Wolff and his team see no way to turn this around quickly, and even former drivers have given up on the squad already. Let's find out what the team boss had to say about the performance, and what he deems possible for the coming races. But first, let's look at some comments on Mercedes' performance in Bahrain. Former Mercedes driver Nico Rosberg is concerned that the margin with Red Bull Racing is significantly wider than it was before the race. Considering Mercedes' performance last year, the results in Bahrain seemed to be not too awful, but Toto Wolff afterwards talked of one of his worst racing days. Rosberg, like his previous team manager, was disappointed with the German stable's performance. Rosberg is concerned about a wider margin to Red Bull. The 2016 world champion said that if Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez had not been told to be cautious with their tyres, the distance to Red Bull would have been considerably wider. They were 50 seconds behind Verstappen, who didn't give everything. That would have been 60 seconds otherwise. So a second per lap? That is intense, he said. The 37-year-old German believes his former team will need to find a magic bullet to stay in the race, but believes this would be tough since Mercedes still does not grasp why the existing model is failing. They need to find a magic bullet and make big progress quickly, but they don't really get it themselves, and that's the difficult thing, Rosberg added. Rosberg wasn't the only analyst that looked down on Mercedes, as former champion Damon Hill has had his say on the performance. Damon Hill pities Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. The Bahrain Grand Prix, according to the Sky Sports expert, was a humiliating experience for Mercedes, which was defeated on sheer speed by customer team Aston Martin. Poor old Lewis and George Russell, Hill commented of Mercedes' poor performance at the Bahrain International Circuit. I mean, this was a race that Toto described as his worst day in motor racing. They were humiliated. Hamilton remained upbeat after the race, saying he loved his fight with Fernando Alonso, but his team manager disagreed. Hill also sees nothing good for Mercedes' performance in Bahrain, and the analyst thinks that the German racing stable will be worse off than in the disaster year of 2022. They were beaten by a customer car. The gap is probably bigger now than it was last year, continued the 1996 world champion. Nevertheless, confusion is spreading over Mercedes' choice to remain with the W13 concept, which caused the team nothing but issues last year. They even had the rules amended a little bit on safety grounds so that the automobiles were lifted higher, additionally 1.5 centimeters. And that hasn't helped them, it appears, Hill added. As a result, the former F1 driver believes that Mercedes' difficulties will not be resolved soon. Maybe there's fundamentally something wrong with the direction that they've gone in. If that's the case, then they've got a bigger problem, said Hill, referring to the constraints by the budget cap. They might have to just plug on with what they've got and prove them wrong with their design. Well, what does the team have to say about this? Toto Wolff sees a difficult road ahead for his Mercedes team. The team's manager saw that the distance with Red Bull had widened again. Will the German racing squad fundamentally alter the W14 formula? Wolff expressed his disappointment to the media after the Bahrain Grand Prix. I think we've almost doubled, if not tripled, the gap to Red Bull, and this is what we need to look at. The Austrian sees few silver linings. The Mercedes is lacking in downforce. With us, everything's bad. The single lap pace was still good, but in the race we saw the consequences. To put it bluntly, it's just we were lacking downforce, and when you're lacking downforce, you're sliding the tyres, and when you're sliding the tyres, you're going backwards. Mercedes, according to Wolff, has lost a year of development and may need to be totally revamped. He points to Aston Martin, who has changed its vehicle design and is now in the running. Mercedes is contemplating redesigning the car, still with an emphasis on making this work, obviously, but we've already looked at different concepts, Wolff said. Toto Wolff feels Aston Martin might serve as good inspiration for Mercedes. Alonso finished third, behind the Red Bulls of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, with Hamilton and Russell finishing 5th and 7th, separated by the other Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. With the jump ahead in performance for the green cars in comparison to the beginning in 2022, Wolff believes Mercedes can achieve the same degree of advancement. What Aston Martin were able to achieve is a good inspiration, because they came back from 2 seconds off the pace to being the second quickest team, probably on the road, Wolff said. But Mercedes still feel the gap to Red Bull is huge, and that the team will need to work hard to narrow it after finishing 52nd behind Max Verstappen in Bahrain. Lewis Hamilton said that they had the 4th best car, after struggling to overtake Carlos Sainz and failing to defend against surprise podium finisher Fernando Alonso. Andrew Chauvelin, trackside engineering director, detailed the major areas where Mercedes is missing after a rough start to their 2023 campaign. It was a very difficult Sunday. The gap to Red Bull is huge, and we've got Aston Martin and Ferrari ahead of us too. Clearly, we have a lot of work ahead, and we need to go back and come up with a plan to try and find improvements. We are missing overall grip, and on a high degradation track like today, there was a little that the drivers could do to assault. However, it's encouraging to see how the team is pulling together and how well the drivers are working together. Chauvelin went on to remark that the team's present state is not acceptable, and that he expects a lot of effort to be done to grasp their difficulties before the next race in Saudi Arabia. This is the second season we've started on the back foot though, and we're under no illusion that this is not acceptable for our team. We've got a few days to regroup and improve ahead of Saudi. We'll work together to try and make sure the next race is a better one than this weekend. Before to George Russell's triumph in Brazil last year, Mercedes' last one in Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in 2021. So, as you can imagine, Mercedes' humiliation in the Bahrain Grand Prix was compounded when they were passed by customer team Aston Martin. But how is this all possible? How could a team that has been so dominant in recent years fall off like this? Well, apparently the departure of the two lead aero engineers to Red Bull Racing, and of all places Aston Martin, was alleged to have rocked the German racing stable hard. I think what hurts Mercedes the most is that they've lost the number 1 and 2 in the aero department, explained Michael Schmidt in the podcast of Auto, Motor and Sport. What's more, the number 1 is now employed by Aston Martin, while the number 2 is employed by Red Bull Racing. Mercedes suffers this defeat at the hands of Red Bull and Aston Martin. The change happened just before the transition phase from the old cars to the ground effect cars, Schmidt added. Mercedes is now grappling with a car that is still not operating as intended, and claims it has no plan B. But they are said to have another design of side pods ready to go. Mercedes-Benz has based the W14 on last year's design, claiming that development goals were accomplished. These objectives, however, seem to have been set too low. According to Schmidt, the team does have other options. I think Mercedes has 2 variants ready as alternatives. What do you think? Have Mercedes got a plan B? Will they try and replicate the looks of the Red Bull, just like Aston Martin did? This could be a true game changer for Mercedes, as they had the car with the highest top speed last season, so their engine could be classed as one of the best. It's just that the team is lacking heavily in the aero department now. Losing the 2 best people in this department has been a huge loss for Mercedes, and it's showing on track. Will they be able to turn this around? They are expecting to launch their first proper big upgrade in the couple of races, probably in Baku, Miami or Italy. We can't wait to see what they'll bring to the grid, because it'll be an expensive decision to make, and with the cost cap in place, it could be hard to realise. So what are your thoughts on Mercedes' current situation? Are they going to be able to overcome the bad performance of the W14? Or will they fall even further behind when the other teams start to introduce upgrades in the coming races? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.